Okay, picture this. You've just stubbed your toe on a heavy piece of furniture. Your immediate, completely instinctive reaction is to just reach down and vigorously rub it, right? But if you ever actually stop to wonder why doing that seems to make it hurt less, it's not just some psychological distraction. It is literally a physiological override switch built right into your nervous system. Stick with me because the fascinating answer to that exact question lies at the very end of our journey today.
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into what is essentially the ultimate user's manual for feeling, the somatosensory system. We're going to unpack exactly how you and I navigate and experience the physical world, and we'll do it in a fun, completely intuitive way. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll track a physical sensation by looking at 1. Making sense of touch, 2. The sensors in your skin, 3. Data highways to the brain, 4. Mapping the human body, 5. The signs of pain, and finally, 6. How the body controls pain. Let's jump in.
Okay, let's dive right into part 1, making sense of touch.
Now, the somatosensory system is essentially responsible for detecting 4 major types of information. We've got touch, formerly known as mechanoception, pain, or nociception, temperature, which is thermoception, and body position, known as proprioception. Now, I want you to try something with me real quick. Close your eyes for a second and just touch your index finger to your nose. Go ahead, do it. You didn't have to look to know exactly where your nose and your finger were in space, right? Well, that intuitive awareness is the hidden superpower of proprioception at work, and it's happening constantly without you even thinking about it.
Moving right along to part 2, the sensors in your skin. Zooming in a bit, nestled within the different layers of your skin are these highly specialized sensors called mechanoreceptors. There are 4 primary types we care about here: Meissner corpuscles, Merkel cells, Pacinian corpuscles, and Ruffini endings. And what's really crucial to know here is that these are large-diameter, myelinated sensors. Because they have that thick myelin insulation, they can conduct signals incredibly fast. They basically act like these highly specialized data collectors, just waiting for you to interact with the world. So if you reach out right now and run your hand over a textured surface, maybe the fabric of your shirt or the wood of a desk, your Merkel cells are currently hard at work reading that specific fine sensory data. Meanwhile, your Meissner corpuscles are detecting the motion of your hand slipping over those textures. Deeper down in the skin, Pacinian corpuscles are acting almost like tiny seismographs, detecting vibration. And your Ruffini endings, they're stretching and pulling, helping you identify the physical shape of larger objects you hold. It's a massive team effort. All right, part 3, data highways to the brain. Now, what's really interesting about this is how the data gets shipped up to the brain. Your body uses 2 primary ascending data highways. On one hand, we have the dorsal column medial lemniscus system, or DCML for short. Think of this as the VIP express lane for high-resolution data. It handles fine, discriminating touch, vibration, and that proprioception we tested earlier. On the other hand is the anterolateral pathway. You can think of this one as the body's gritty, urgent alarm system. It takes care of transmitting pain, extreme temperature, and crude touch. They travel through entirely different parts of the spinal cord, but both ultimately race upward toward the brain. Which brings us to part 4, mapping the human body. To understand how the brain organizes all this incoming traffic, we first need to define something called a dermatome. A dermatome is simply the specific territory of skin that is assigned to a single spinal root. So imagine your entire body is divided up into horizontal slices or bands. Each of these bands acts as a regional data collector, gathering all the sensory information from that specific patch of skin and shipping it to one very specific level of the spinal cord. It is incredibly organized. And once all that beautifully organized data finally reaches the primary somatosensory cortex in your brain, it creates what's called the sensory homunculus. This is basically a map of your body located right on the surface of your brain. But here is the wild part. The size of a body part on this brain map is not based on its actual physical size. Nope, it's based entirely on its innervation density. Because your fingertips and your lips have incredibly high tactile acuity, meaning they are absolutely packed with those Merkel cells and Meissner corpuscles, your brain literally visualizes your hands and lips as being massive compared to things like your back or your legs. Let's shift gears a bit for part 5, the science of pain. The International Association for the Study of Pain defines it like this: an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage.
Now, notice that it doesn't just say a sensory experience. That's absolutely crucial. Pain is profoundly tied to our emotions, our memories, and autonomic responses like your heart racing or breaking a sweat. It's essentially the body's ultimate survival security system, forcing you to pay attention so you can protect yourself.
But as you probably know, not all pain is the same. Have you ever gotten a paper cut and felt that immediate, super sharp, stinging pain, which is then followed maybe a minute later by this dull, throbbing ache? Well, that perfectly illustrates the two types of pain fibers. The sharp, localized, fast pain travels on A delta fibers, which have a little bit of myelin for speed. But the slower, dull, burning ache, that travels on unmyelinated C fibers. So your brain gets the quick warning first, followed by a lingering reminder to baby that injury. And when tissue actually gets damaged, it kicks off a whole inflammatory pain chain reaction. First, the blood vessels dilate, causing redness. Then, increased permeability causes swelling, which brings heat to the area. And finally, and this is the most important part for our nervous system, inflammatory mediators like histamine, serotonin, and prostaglandins are released. These chemicals literally bathe your peripheral nerve endings, sensitizing them so much that things that wouldn't normally hurt suddenly do. That is exactly why a swollen, inflamed joint hurts when you barely even move it.
So, the crucial point is part 6, how the body controls pain. To really understand how our bodies actively fight back against pain, we have to look closely at the spinal cord. When a pain fiber, a nociceptor, and a normal touch fiber travel toward the spinal cord, their pathways end up converging. Right there in the dorsal horn, they essentially interact with each other, and this structural convergence is the absolute key to managing pain. Which brings us to the gate control theory and the ultimate aha moment answering that question I asked you at the very beginning of this explainer. When you stub your toe, the nociceptors fire and open a gate to send pain signals up to your brain. But when you immediately reach down and start rubbing your toe, you are actively firing up those fast, large-diameter touch fibers we learned about earlier. Because they are faster, they literally race ahead to the spinal cord, trigger an inhibitory interneuron, and intercept and close the gate on those slower pain signals. Rubbing the toe physically blocks the pain data from ever getting to your brain. Honestly, isn't that incredible?
But, the nervous system's wiring still holds some pretty wild mysteries. For instance, consider this. Why might a problem with a vital internal organ, like your heart, make the skin of your left arm ache? We call this referred pain. It happens because the sensory fibers from your internal organs and the sensory fibers from your skin, dermatomes, actually converge on the exact same projection neurons in your spinal cord. So when the brain gets a distress signal, it isn't really used to feeling organ pain, so it mistakenly projects that pain onto the corresponding skin area, known as a head zone. It really just leaves you marveling at how deeply interconnected our internal wiring is. So next time you feel a sensation, whether it's just the texture of your clothes or a stubbed toe, I hope you remember the incredible data highways working completely behind the scenes. So what other hidden overrides do you think your nervous system might be hiding? Keep exploring, and thanks for learning with me today.